Well, hi folks, and welcome to episode 180 of Retro Power Uncut. And here we are in the fabrication workshop, and we're going to start with a little talk about the Jensen Interceptor, although trusty saw in the background, we'll come back to that in a bit. So yes, Jensen. Stu has been, funnily enough, has had quite a frustrating day today. He had just collared me for a brief chat as he was just washing his hands to go home a couple of minutes ago. We're filming this on Thursday, just to give you a sort of time reference. We film on Thursday each week, and he was apologising for having taken quite a long time today, making quite limited progress. And this is just so typical of the type of thing that happens doing this custom car, effectively building prototype vehicles constantly. Stu's been working on a carrier, effectively, for the vents. We're using some Bentley, I don't have one handy, but Jamie will have some footage. We're using some Bentley organ stop vents for the centre 4 vents in this. 2 of those will be fresh air and 2 of those will be via the HVAC unit. 2 are via this fresh air intake in the scuttle, which we've repurposed as just a plain fresh air intake. We can use the organ stops as the shut-offs for those, which is great, but there's a little bit of complexity in terms of the depths of all the parts. We're going to be using some 3D printed pieces to couple things together and various other things which you'll see as they develop. But Stu's been battling today. He's just had one of those days of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and he's had one of those days trying to get his duct, his intake air duct, to neatly mate up with the scuttle vent here. And he's been fighting some irregularities. He'd made a couple of assumptions which weren't quite right, and then also there was just some irregularities in the casting on this. It's really not a very neat casting on the back, and trying to get his duct to come up cleanly around that casting, the only way you could really do it is by fitting and unfitting the duct. So poor Stu has literally been fitting and unfitting that duct most of the day today, backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. I could see the frustration building in his eyes. And he's a very steady and careful man, Stu, as you'll have picked up from the videos. But I think he was just about hitting the end of his tolerance band today with that job. But he has won the battle. It now fits. The duct is now in. Now, you've seen it previously, but it is now fitted. It now fits up under there. It's now held in by the shoulder bolts that retain that. And this now fits. So he's now getting close to a position where all of this can tie together and will all tie into place and link up to the dash, which is yet to be made, all the final parts for the dash. But that's what Stu's been battling with today on that. So yeah, Stu's basically been battling making those aluminium fabricated sections to take the vents, which are all asymmetric and quite fiddly to make, and then getting the ductwork into the bulkhead, getting the fixings in place into the bulkhead to hold those. And we're pretty much now in a position that he can then continue with the dash fitment and continue with the dash work. The aluminium, I've ordered some aluminium yesterday, which arrived today. For him to continue with the dash, we need some 2mm 5251 aluminium, 5000 series aluminium, nice hard stuff that doesn't dent and retain shape really nicely. We tend to use that for most of our structural and or sort of cosmetic fabricated parts that don't have compound curves in. We tend to use 5000 series aluminium for those. That's turned up today so that he can get the dash fascia sections made. He's got the material to get on with that. So yeah, he's making good progress. Despite his protestations of struggle earlier, he's been making good progress on that. It's just been a bit of an uphill battle for him today. So that's where he's at on that. And then a bit of a move round. Progress has happened here. Matt's been busy with sort of all sorts of things, because we've been, at the very beginning of the week, he just had a tiny little bit more finishing off, scraping off the underseal from the Jag, which he's done. That's all completely done. That was just a couple of hours on Monday morning getting that done. Then it was a case of getting that off the lift and onto a trolley. Now, we've put it onto a trolley, the sort of generic trolleys that we move cars around on that you can see underneath it there. We use those because they're much more compact and easy to lift the car on and off the rotisserie within our blast room behind me there, because the next job on that body shell is going to be blasting it, which we've not hurried into because we're tying in with some other work. But the next stop for that body shell will be blasting, which is why it's now on that trolley. And that trolley is relatively easy to lift onto a rotisserie in the confines of our blast room, so that's why it's on that. But in parallel with that, earlier in the week, Matt's also made a trolley to carry that body shell. When we get that further along in its process, once we've done the metal work, carried out our final reblast and zinc metal spray, then the trolley, the car will then go on to what sort of proper trolley, as I would call it, a custom-made trolley that then enables us to wheel it in and out of the paint booth and body prep area and support it correctly on its axle lines so that we can do all the panel fit up with it on an easy-to-move, tough trolley. And Matt's made that trolley and got that all ready, so further down the line that job's ticked off already, that's ready to go. And then what we're going to do when we blast the body shell, I'll also give that trolley a quick blast and we'll stick a bit of paint over that, make it look respectable for while we're doing the work on the car. So that's done. The next stage was going to be Matt making the trolley for the Interceptor, but we've had a bit of a clash of tasks happening in that Stu needs the Interceptor on the ground to work on it. Matt needed to put the Interceptor in the air on the lift to be able to make the trolley. So at the moment we've paused that job, and then Matt's moved on to getting the Audi onto the jig, which, as you can see, it is. And that meant using trusty donkey saw. So we've done, I'm going to run over here and pick up a couple of drawings. Oh no, I'm not, because they've moved. Where's the drawings? Ah, Matt's got the drawings here. So, as an example of how this was done, I think you've seen the CAD. I'm going to throw drawings all over the floor now, but these are some of the typical parts drawings that we've done with dimensions on, and Matt's then used these to cut all the sections, cut all the pieces of channel. We've CNC plasma cut these profiles to go on the ends. The plates were laser cut for us by Tamworth Steel. Actually, they laser cut these plates in 12mm steel for the bases, and that enables us then to make all of the jig setup. And then if I can find it amongst here somewhere, here we are. I can then show you. Laid out neatly is our own equivalent of a Celette jig fixture diagram, and that then shows all of the fixtures in their final positions on what correct holes they're fitted to, and you can then that enables us to know exactly where these need bolting to the Celette jig. All of this was done entirely in CAD, entirely based on a jig body dimension diagram that I found online. So there's always potential it might be wrong, because we all know that the internet can sometimes be wrong. However, the internet was not wrong. We fitted all the fixtures to the positions on the jig where the CAD drawing said they should be, and they all line up with the fixture points on the shell. So that's good. Now, we have discovered an irregularity, which is why it's good to put the car on the body shell. To put the body shell on the jig, because we found that, as anticipated, this chassis rail, this side, which is the one that's bent, and has been pushed up into the floor, is not the correct height here. This is about 5mm too high at this subframe mounting pad here. The other side's about 2mm high at the back. This one's about 5mm high here. So we are going to need to do some work here. We're going to remove this chassis rail, or the rear half of the chassis rail. We're going to remove that. We're going to remove the floor from above it, and remove part of this footwell, and we're going to straighten that chassis rail, put new flanges on it, and replace it and put it back into the shell in the correct place. We've got a little bit of work to do there. We kind of thought that was going to be the case. I think this car's had a fairly hefty bump on this front corner at some point in the past, because most of this front corner appears to have been replaced, or at least removed and refitted. So we've got a bit of work to do there, but this is why we put it on the jig, because if we didn't, we wouldn't know that. We'd build the car and then find we built it with a twisted front subframe, which is not what we want to do. So there is the reason why we spend the time and money, customers' money and our time to make these fixtures, because if you build that sort of discrepancy into the car at the beginning, you spent a huge amount of money building a car which is on poor foundations, not what we do. So other little aside, we used trusty Dominic the donkey saw to cut up all these channel sections, as I mentioned before, and we actually did all that with the old blade that was already in it, because I hadn't got any new blades then. Now I ordered some new blades, which are here, which were courtesy of a man on eBay. But interestingly and kindly, Ian Temple, one of our watchers on YouTube from Doncaster, has sent me some saw blades, saying he had these sat in the garage from a long time ago and I hope they fit my new old saw. Unfortunately, they don't. They're too long and not quite wide enough. But I'm sure they'll be useful for something. They'll certainly be very good for making some scrapers out of. So thank you very much. I can send them back if you like them back. If not, we'll probably make some scrapers out of them. And it's very much, the gesture is very much appreciated. So thank you very much, Ian Temple, and thanks for watching. So that's very, very kind indeed. But we also have some new blades, which I'm going to put one in, so and then we'll be able to carry on using that for other jobs. I was actually using that a little bit as well for cutting the under here. You can see the bosses. These are the 40mm bosses that are underneath, which actually act as the top spacers. I probably ought to do a little bit of an explanation there as well. If we duck right down under here and I can point, these spacers these are loose. These are bolted through these top plates. These are bolted through and up into the car. These are sufficiently high that they can be unbolted, removed, and then the subframe can be fitted to the car, and then shorter bosses be substituted for these to allow us to fit the subframe and still bolt the car to the jig, because we're going to want to do the mechanical dry build of this car with it still on the jig. Put the engine and transmission in, put the rear subframe and rear differential in, and fit all those parts with it still bolted to the jig. So I've tried to make this fairly universal so that we can do mechanicals in and mechanicals out with the same fixtures by putting these spacers on the top. So I can take the spacers out and fit shorter ones, fit subframes. So that's the plan there. That's why those bosses are there and why the towers don't go all the way up to the car. It also makes fitting the car to it quite a lot easier. And currently, Matt's working on the front strut tower attachments. We were going to fabricate those, hence the unit down there. We've actually had a slight change of tack, and we've decided to use the Celette ones because it'll make doing the tops quite a lot easier. So we're using the actual Celette McPherson strut towers instead. That would have been a slight change of tack there. But that's where we're at on the Quattro. So progress being made there, which is good. And then moving on from that, we will whiz past the Allegro. We'll whiz round to the front of the Allegro, where Bobby has been working on quite a tricky problem actually. The bonnet hinges. He'd done a redesign of the bonnet hinges. There was a couple of issues with the redesign of them which needed revision. So he's now revised that redesign of the bonnet hinges, and it's taken a few revisions and a few iterations and a bit of trial and error, and also quite a lot of CAD work. But he's done those iterations, done the CAD work, and now got a fully working, fully set up hinge mechanism. The reason for this complication is, if we rewind all the way back, we've lost the original Allegro bonnet hinges were horrible, but B, they no longer, would have been in free space because the bit of Allegro they were attached to is no longer there. There's a bit of Honda there instead. So we needed to remake those hinges regardless. And the parallel linkage mechanism that we'd already used and that was based on the original Ford one for the Mark 1 Escort hinges more or less fitted. So we initially tried to use that to try and reduce the amount of bespoke engineering and having to do things from scratch. However, they didn't really fit well enough. There was a couple of issues with that. So Bobby redesigned them, got everything to fit, but we've still hit on a couple of other issues. The bonnet needs to come forward quite quickly as it lifts for the back edge of the bonnet to clear the scuttle. And while earlier on in mock-up it did clear the scuttle, we weren't completely convinced it cleared it by enough. It was a little bit tight on the paintwork. So we decided that needed some more clearing, and then we were absolutely out of adjustment at that point. But Bobby had no further forward he could come without the hinges fouling the strut towers. And at that point, a complete redesign of the entire geometry was necessary. So he has completely redesigned the hinge geometry, drawn it all in CAD, tried it, CNC plasma cut the parts. This is where, I mean, the CNC plasma cutter in that room pays off hugely, because he can CNC cut the parts, try them. If there's a change needed, it's a few clicks on the computer with the CAD, it'll adjust that, then straight back through to the recut the new parts, try them again. You know, you can do 3 iterations probably in the space of 45 minutes. It's so quick. Whereas if we were waiting for subcontract laser cut parts, it would be much more difficult. We would probably have to 3D print them, but the 3D printed parts are not strong enough to carry the bonnet accurately and to actually function in a really accurate fashion. So yeah, really good to have the prototype facilities on site so that we can do these things quickly and efficiently. So yeah, Bobby's got the hinges built. They're all, he's really pleased with those. That's all working correctly. And then the other area he's been working on is under the front wheel arch, where we've got a shield mounting under here for the dirt shields that span the gap between the inner wing and the outer wheel arch, which stops all the mud being sprayed up into the back of the wing and through the gap onto the A-pillar at the back. So it's this shield goes in there and just will prevent the dirt being sprayed into the hinge pillar. And then there's also a shield at the front that's going to prevent the dirt spraying into the front area at the front of the wing. So he's put the flanges on for those. He's also got the flanges to fit everywhere around the wing at the front behind the indicator, where the indicator units will be and the air intakes will be. To just seal off all that area correctly as well. So that's all come on nicely, that's all good. And then moving round to this side, now I won't move around to that side because I can't get round there. I'll go round this way. We'll get round this way. And Tom, who isn't here today, has finished the inner wheel arch on this side of the car. And that's also now all pretty much complete. As far as I'm aware, that is basically complete and ready to go. And this profile now all fits the carbon fibre quarter panel. Then when the quarter panel is fitted to the car, that can bond all the way down this line, and that will basically, the carbon will become structural at that point, will be glued onto the body shell and all fit correctly. So yeah, really pleased with progress. We're on the very late stages of getting this body shell complete. Really, the rear valance needs to go on. We need the quarters on to be able to do that. But yeah, the rear valance will go on, and at that point, we're all pretty much there in terms of metalwork. I think we're on the very final furlong. And so over to the body shop. Currently, wet flatting going on the Redux E30 M3. That's what's going on in the background right now. But earlier in the week, we were very grateful to receive some goodies from Segola, which was very kind of them. And I'll hand over to Mark to elaborate a little more on those.
Okay, we've just unboxed a package from Segola. Thanks for sending these great guns. We're going to be doing some promotional work with them. They've sent us a detail gun, also for smart repair. We've got a 1.8 primer gun. We've got their 4,600 extreme guns. They've sent us two, one so we can just keep it clear, and one for the water base or solvent. So yeah, me and Steve are going to get a rip this afternoon on these and see how good they are.
Thank you, Mark, for that. And then we also have those goodies in a bit of action, where I'm going to hand back to Mark now again. This is all a bit bits and bobs. I'm going to hand over to Mark now because he has also been trialling those, and they've been generally having a play with them in the paint booth, getting the feel of those goodies and giving them a little test run. So I'll hand back over to Mark to kind of explain that, and also just explain the other bits that have been going on this week in the body shop, because there's various things been going on in parallel. So over to Mark.
Alright, so you all want a bit more info on blocking and sanding, so we'll go a bit nat style on this. So this is an epoxy primed carbon bonnet for the Project 1, the Mark 1 Escort next door. So yeah, what I'll do is use the black guide coat, which is here. I've already done it here, but I'll just show you, like, you put this on. For the epoxy, we just start with 320 on this. So you just, like, as you sand, you start to see the black guide coat just disappear. If you do have like a little bit where there's a bit, you've obviously got a low spot. So you just keep blocking. Be very gentle, like here, like you've got to be a bit careful. There's a bit of flex there, so you just run the block very gently. Or sometimes I like to do it, just get your hand under. Take a bit of the pressure out of the flex and carbon. Apart from that's it. Then after this, I'll get some 800 wet flat. Same process with the black go coat. And that's it. But generally on like other panels, if we're doing filler work, sometimes we start with 80 grit. We'll all the way down to 180. Then do the polyester, and then that goes all the way from 120, 180, 320, and then the epoxy goes on then. And then it's like what I've just said. That's it, so generally that's it, just the blocking stuff. So there's some questions answered. Probably someone would probably say suck eggs, and that's not the way you do it, but this is the way we do it, so that's it. Right, so this is the BMW M3 panels, satin clear coat on the inside of the panels on the bare carbon. Let's give that nice look. Yeah, so they're done now. So they can go on the car tomorrow. And I've got the Project One's carbon panels all primed, prepped, ready to hit with some colour tomorrow. Side skirts for the M3 as well here, because we've sanded them back and then we put the matte clear on them to give it the contrast along the bottom of the car. And then over here we have some Range Rover test panels, because Nat brought some panels, but they're the plastic ones and they're horrendous. So we just use them because we just got Segura to drop some guns off this morning. So me and Steve's never painted before, so we gave him a go. So we hit it with just some 2-pack off the FJ. So we did. Hit that, 2 coats. Well happy with that gun. Well happy. Considering Steve's never painted before with a gun like that, and it's like a mirror finish. So yeah, that's it for in here this week. See you in another clip.
And thank you very much, Mark. That pretty much wraps up what's going on in there. And then just another little mention of somebody else in the background here as well is resting on my toolbox. I need to say a thank you to Matt Stakes at Stakesy's Metalwork Machinery, up there as well. We, as you'll know, we don't generally go in for an awful lot of advertising for people, but Matt's been a friend and help to us for a number of years. I've mentioned this before, but if you're new to the channel, I'll explain again. He's been in business almost exactly the same length of time. He started, I believe, in 2009, much the same time that we started here. So he's been on much the same journey that we've been on in terms of growth of the business, and been on a very similar journey. He's quite similar in age to me as well. I felt quite a parallel journey with him. We really like Matt. He's a really good guy. Lots of people know who he is. Lots of people buy equipment off him. He's pretty well known in the sheet metal working machinery sort of field. And I spotted in the background on one of his Instagram posts this Bulldog pick a little while ago, and he has very kindly sent me one to have a little play with, which I'm pretty pleased about, because it's a very handy bit of kit when we're doing the very final finishing on panels, just to take out, when we're filing panels, just to take out the very last little detailed areas where, particularly if you're ham-fisted like me, you end up putting more marks in with a dolly, trying to find your dolly on those small points, than you actually do getting the little final dents out. Whereas with one of these, you can't miss. So it's very good for just lifting up those areas. When you're tapping and filing a panel, it's very, very good for just lifting up those last few areas where your blue's not quite coming off. It's just really good for lifting those last areas up. Really, really handy bit of kit. So he sent us that. We also had a set of tipping rolls from Matt earlier in the week as well for our bead roller, which he also supplied us with. And yeah, very kindly and very quickly sent me some tipping rolls so that we could get on with doing a couple of jobs on the inner arches on the Allegro. So it's also been very helpful of him to send those. But really appreciate that. Thank you, Matt. And very useful bit of kit. And hopefully a few other people will buy these off you, because I think it's a jolly useful bit of equipment, which we will hopefully be showing at some point in the future. I don't quite know where, because we've kind of missed the job on the Jensen. Would have been quite useful on the Jensen. So the next lot of sheet metal fine tuning will probably be somewhere between the XJC and maybe some bits on the E-Type. Probably going to be XJC, so it will be a while before you see it in action on a customer project, I think. But a really useful bit of kit all the same, which I wanted to get while he actually had some. So thank you, Matt. And at that point, I think it's time to hand over to Cal and see what's going on in the assembly workshop. So see you next week. Right, thank you, Nat. I should grab my roundstone coffee and have a little look around what's going on. So Jim's basically clearing out scrap at the moment, just beavering away in the CNC router area. You can see there's a growing pile of components here. So these are all the profiles that are going to go together to hopefully make the buck for the rear of the E-Type, and he's just in the process of clearing out all the scrap bits at the minute. I was saying earlier, it reminds me of one of those, one of them three-dimensional dinosaur puzzles you built when you were a child. Right, Project 1 Escort. So this is where the bulk of the focus, certainly from myself and Gibbo, has been this week, and we kind of reached that point we've been looking forward to where a whole cascade of jobs are opened up. So Dean returned to me the leather covers for the rear arch tubs, which I said last week I'd forgotten to pattern, but got them done in, and then that basically opened up all of the rest of the interior going together. So we were able to get the rear cards in after Gibbo had fitted the speaker grill parts onto those. So they're fitted, the bulkhead panel that goes against the back, the floor panels, and then we got a whole load of anodising back to that as well. So there was the strip that we've made that finishes off the front of that seat base area, that's black anodised aluminium, and also the sill trims. And having those back opened up most of the carpet fitment. The keystone of the carpet fitment is the transmission tunnel section, and to allow us to do that I needed to finish the centre console. So centre console was fitted with the switches that Alex was potting the terminals on last week, gear gaiter in, and that meant we could then glue the tunnel section in, get the centre console bolted in, get the rear section of the tunnel carpet in, and then with the anodised sill trims we could get the sill carpets in. The section that sits vertically because of the anodised trim on there, and then it's basically just laying in the floor sections of carpet. We've got the screen wash tank / footrest to go in on this side, so we've still got to fit that in. Some of the carpets at the minute are just resting in there, but we are very much on the countdown to having that interior done. Gibbo's now fitted all of the vents, the ducting is going in, the auxiliary gauges are in, the instrument binnacle also, which came back from anodising last week, has now been assembled with the warning lights and instruments. So that is literally ready to go in. There's a little bit of fettling of the dash pad and frame required to just get the fasteners in place for that, but that is literally ready to plop in there now. And before that goes in, we just need to fit this. So this is the electric power steering column. It's a Vauxhall Agila EPS unit. It's one of the more compact motored power steering units. And then on the top of it here we've got the Peterson CAN bus controller. So this is taking the CAN bus signal from the engine ECU, which has a speed information on it, and relaying that information to the Vauxhall controller unit that controls how much assistance that unit gives. So we can actually use the original Vauxhall type speed related assistance, but we can program the exact relationship between speed and assistance. But the gist is that the faster you go, the less assistance it gives. And then the other unit on here is the decoder and controller for the instruments. So again, this is taking the CAN bus data stream from the engine ECU and translating that to the instruments, so that we're not duplicating sensors essentially. So we've got one set of sensors that give all the pressures, temperatures, etc. to the ECU, and then that translates that data stream to power the gauges that we were showing you in there and down here. So that's all coming together well. There's a bit of a domino effect in the boot, so you probably saw earlier Mark's just painting the bonnet and boot for this now. As soon as the boot's done, we can put that on. We need to check how much we need to soften the sprung torsion bars to give the right amount of lift for what will be a much lighter boot lid now. As soon as that's done and they're in for the last time, we can then put in the bulkhead panel in the boot that sits on the back of the fuel tank. We can then put in the damper reservoir mounts. So these are, I can't do it one-handed, but these are bronze anodised little stanchions here mount the damper reservoirs just behind that bulkhead, behind the fuel tank, as a bit of a feature in the boot, and also means you can access them to adjust them easily. So it's all coming together pretty well. And then on the underside, they were just fitting the anti-roll bar mounts, which have just been painted. adjusting the handbrake cable and just securing the handbrake cables under there. We've been making up the front number plate mount, which just happens to be right next to me here. So that's ready to go on. And then Alex was carrying on with the initial configuration of the engine ECU, sort of leading up to the first fire up. One of the things on that was the cam sensor. So we've made our own cam sensor, which fits on the tacho drive that is built into the dry sump pump on these BD engines, which conveniently gives us the correct rotation relative to the crank, i.e. half speed versus the crank, which, although you can manage without one, I've probably been into this before, you can manage without it because you can run wasted spark and non-sequential injection. So with a normal crank sensor, although it knows what position the crank is within its rotation, it doesn't know whether any given cylinder is on its firing stroke or on its exhaust stroke. So the way that you can get around that is by putting in half the fuel on the exhaust stroke, half the fuel on the intake stroke, and then it pulls in the sum total of that amount on the induction stroke, and wasted spark because it basically sparks wastedly on the exhaust stroke. If you want to run full sequential, so it basically does one firing of fuel as it's intaking and doesn't do a wasted spark, you need a cam sensor to know what position the engine's in. Now that on its own isn't a massive reason to do that. However, with the knock sensing we're doing on this engine, the ECU knowing what position it is and what cylinder is firing specifically means that when it senses knock, it also can tell you what cylinder it was that detonation came from. If you don't have that cam sensor there, although you can have the knock sensor sensing detonation, it won't know which cylinder it was that was detonating. So it's quite good for in combination with the knock control. So yes, cam sensor here, our own design, aluminium housing, bearings, that little trigger wheel we made is running in. Again, machining by Jonathan at PBE CNC, and that just takes a generic Bosch position sensor that picks up the signal. So Alex was testing that this week with a little oscilloscope on it to make sure, and a power drill basically to take it to the RPM, more than the RPM that it's ever going to run. And that was all looking good. So yeah, we're kind of in the countdown. Next thing will be the rest of the interior going in, boot lid on, bonnet on, getting pretty close to that first fire up, and the nervousness that will go with that. What else? Come over this way. I've actually been skirting past various things that have been going on with Project Churchill because I just kept forgetting over the last few weeks. But Anthony's been on with building up the subframes for this. So we got the diff and the hub carriers actually back from Simply Performance a couple of weeks ago. They've done a full rebuild on the diff. That's running 3.5 crown wheel and pinion ratio and a power lock limited slip. And then we've been through everything, doing all the surface finishing processes, so things like the drive shafts when there's a mating face, we don't want too much build up on that, so they've been Xylem coated. Fasteners, mild steel stuff like fasteners, and for instance these handbrake arms have got a zinc nickel coating. The main frame's been blasted zinc metal sprayed and powder coated. And we've been going through the process of bolting it all together, and then same with the front cross member. So if you recap, that's essentially our own design, that cross member, or it's using Jag XJ, I think it's X300 XJ lower arms and hub carriers. The upper arms are a modified length based on a Jag XJ arm. These, I quickly will add that these welded together arms are not the final thing. We're having some machined. They were cut and shut basically to test the geometry, which all worked out fine. So we're having our own machined version of those upper arms made at the minute. But once they're here, that's going to be that front end mostly together then. The Detroit Speed steering rack is ready to go on there as well. Yeah, so I think once that shell's painted, hopefully, fingers crossed, we should be pretty much in a position to get these in and get it rolling in pretty short order. I think on that note, we'll leave it for this week, and I'll see you again next week.